go. This was the debate of all debates. This actually would be the third time playing this show. We did a rerun of this show. Why we had to do it. But the first time around, it did okay. The second time around, it actually did better. Danny Bessner, a friend of the show, friend in real life, wrote an article about fascism a few years ago, and people got very upset with him because of his framing of fascism. And fascism has become one of those words over the last few years, especially in intellectual circles, that everything I don't like is fascism. But Trump is an interesting phenomenon in modern day American political discourse, as he's doing things quite brazenly, but there isn't much that he's doing that we've never seen before. I will repeat that there isn't, not everything, I should say, he's doing. There's some things he's like, whoa, I didn't see that one. But is Trump a fascist and these other presidents aren't? And there was a time where we called Bush Jr. a fascist. There was a time when we called Ronald Reagan a fascist. We don't really say those words around those people as much, but with Trump, you definitely feel it. So Kuba wanted to come on the show because there were some points that he felt that Bessner was a little too flippant on, and he wanted to hammer some of those points home. And these are two men that are PhDs. I forget what Danny's is in, but Kuba's is in political science. So this is what they do for a living. I thought it was a very fruitful discussion. I learned a few things from the talk as well. I think Danny's style is so matter of fact that it can come off as a bit arrogant, and I think that's what people hate more than anything. is a certain amount of arrogance they feel with him. But that aside, listen to the arguments and you'll get something from this conversation. There is no winner in this, but I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation. This is the number 2 show. So do you guys know what the number 1 show is? Do you? Did you have fun on New Year's? What'd you do? Tell me in the comments. I can tell you what I did. There'd be a lot of nothing. A whole lot of nothing. I am literally the most boring person on the internet. I mean, I'm here talking to you. I'm not having fun. But thank you guys so much for all that you've done for TIR in 2025 and moving forward in the year of our Lord 2026. So much more to show you. You have such sights to see. And on that note, I'm out. Let's talk about why you guys are here. Is Trump a fascist? Does it matter? In recent political discourse, the label fascist has been increasingly attached to the governing style of Donald Trump, creating a contentious dialogue that juxtaposes contemporary American authoritarian practices with the historical paradigms of 1930s Europe. In Daniel Bessner's article that he writes about fascism, the argument unfolds around whether American fascism can be seen as a distinct reality or merely a misapplied European construct. While Chris Hedges' article that he wrote extends the discussion by portraying Trump's politics as embodying quintessential elements of fascism. This debate is especially significant when one considers that the United States has a legacy of authoritarian practices well before Trump's time. Practices that include Jim Crow laws, chattel slavery, the genocide of Native American populations, as well as later episodes such as Japanese internment and the repression of dissent during the McCarthy era. The discussion is not merely semantic. The insistence on comparing American political phenomena directly to European fascism risks overshadowing the unique and deeply problematic historical continuities within U.S. governance. While it is undeniable that Trump exhibits dangerous authoritarian tendencies, framing him solely through a fascist lens can obscure the broader historical context in which American power has traditionally leveraged exclusion, violence, and populism. More crucially, this conflation can foster a knee-jerk reaction, equating every instance of state excess with Nazism or Italian fascism, thereby diluting the specificity of those historical regimes while minimizing the long-standing crises of democracy and racial injustice in the United States. Understanding Trump as a symptom rather than the disease is essential. His authoritarianism, while alarming, should be viewed as part of a continuum of state practices that have, over generations, been normalized under different guises. This perspective not only challenges the utility of applying European fascist criteria to American politics, but also reopens a necessary conversation about how historical trajectories, power relations, and systemic violences inform the current state of U.S. democracy. In doing so, the debate calls for a critical reassessment of our political vocabulary and urges a focus on the institutional dynamics that, far from being isolated anomalies, are rooted in America's own political evolution. With that out of the way, let me bring in my co-host for today. He is my homie, my dog. He is my brother from a Canadian mother. He is Deep State Kuba.
Howdy.
How are you? Was that a decent introduction?
You've hit all the right notes and with commendable accuracy.
Okay.
You get an A+ and a little smiley face in the corner.
Okay, I had to use the thesaurus because I knew Bessner was going to be here. And also, coming all the way live from the Northwest, he is the man that is most loved and hated for some reason in this discussion. Please welcome Daniel Bessner.
Hey guys.
You know what I'm going to start calling you? You're like,
what are you going to start calling me?
The best undercover hooper on the left.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Daniel Bessner.
I ball and I game.
Daniel Bessner shows up to the spot in hoop shorts and that sweatshirt, so you just go, oh, just nobody wants that guy. He does the white boys can't jump shit on you and then just destroys you from beyond the left.
Woody Harrelson, big inspo.
That's why you miss LA so much. You miss taking all the people's.
Yeah, I can't go down. Where did that take place? It must have been South LA,
it's supposed
right?
to be South Central. It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Yeah. But we don't say South Central anymore, Jason. It's South LA. after the LA riots, they changed it. Yeah.
Oh, word! They didn't tell me. Okay, so I sent you the Chris Hedges episode where they discussed the history of fascism, and Kuba, you and I were talking about this with Derek Varn yesterday, with what's been going on in the first few months of Trump's presidency. Everybody feels like, well, maybe the radical liberals were correct in 2016 when they kept saying Trump is a fascist, and that meme was going around. He's a fascist. What say you to that, Daniel Bessner?
I it's just kind of goofy a little bit, to be honest. There's just so much precedence in American history for basically everything that Trump is doing. I don't see the need to turn to a European political ideology from the middle of the 20th century, the middle of the 20th century, the 20s to the 40s, to understand what's going on. I don't think it really illuminates anything. I don't think the sort of checklist approach to fascism really makes sense. Like, these bad things Trump is doing are fascist, again, just because there's such obvious precedent in American history. So I don't think it's strange that people are so attached to it. I don't understand why. I understand if it's like a political thing and people like really using it to identify a far right thing that they think is really bad. But in terms of an analytical framework, I don't think it really adds much. I don't think you need it to understand Trump. I don't think it pushes in the right direction of how Trump is actually using the authoritarian power of the American presidency and the American state to do various things that we on the left disagree with. I don't think it works as a category.
Kuba?
Well, and this is one place where I part ways with some of the, America's always been racist, America's always had bad foreign policy, America's always been authoritarian, and even the John Stewart take that this isn't fascism, these are powers that Donald Trump legally holds. There is a break between the exercise of his authority in this second term than what he was doing in his first term. And there might be similarities between mass deportations and the Bracero program under Eisenhower, or and certainly if you go back into the 19th century, you can find countless examples of hideous human rights violations and hideous abuses by purportedly democratic constitutional governments of the United States on a genocidal scale. However, the question is one significant question, which I think his conduct raises right now, is whether the constitutional order is still operative in the sense of, well, will there be a third Trump term? Well, do the regular constitutional procedures and standards that are supposed to be as much a defining element of the American political order as all of the bad stuff that we talked about, are those even functional anymore? After all, if a person inside the United States can be, without any due process, in the light of day and against a court order, disappeared, vanished, thrown into a foreign detention center, a concentration camp, without any recourse, even the courts not being able to impose their verdict on the operations of the state. Well, that is something different. That is something that is a discontinuity. And frankly, I think that one
Cooper,
way
you didn't read my article.
I skimmed it.
You didn't read my article. There's many, many examples of that in the last 30 years. I mean, I think the thing that you could actually do is say there's very clearly a difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2. I think it would be foolish and ignorant to claim otherwise. What he's basically doing is taking the theory of the unitary executive to its logical conclusion. That is the I think intensification that Trump actually represents, is that this theory, which is the idea that the only the president has the legal right to interpret.
No, I'm familiar with it, John. The entire war on terror.
Yeah, I'm explaining it to listeners. Yeah, so the theory is that there's two major points to it. One, which is that only the executive has the right to interpret congressional legislation with regards to the executive branch, and that only executive has the right to interpret judicial orders with relation to the executive branch. That's the difference. The disappearances, the vanishings have happened repeatedly throughout American history. It's just that people are now, I mean, as Adam Goodman wrote in his book, The Deportation Machine, you could just trace this. It's happened to legal residents. It's happened to citizens, mostly happened to Mexicans. So it wasn't of first order importance to the people who were paying attention to this. But I think that the genuine thing, the genuine discontinuity, that's really kind of more of a continuity, is this intensification of this theory of the unitary executive, which is very dangerous, which has been used for 30 years now by the Republican legal establishment. And that's a real problem. And so I think that's what we need to focus on. And really, then we're getting into the problem of the presidency itself, which is a very problematic institution to the degree where I think we've actually been in a low-level constitutional crisis since 1942. It's just that it's, as you know, it's been in relation to foreign relations and national security. Congress hasn't declared war since 1942. That's a constitutional crisis. The United States obviously has gone to war many, many times since then, but nobody's been paying attention. So what we have here is this low-level constitutional crisis coming home and the intensification of the theory of the unitary executive. That's what's going on. That has nothing to do with fascism.
So tell me, describe fascism then.
I could describe it in its interwar context. I could describe it as sharing a family resemblance with far-right authoritarian ideologies. But the sort of relevant context for fascism, which is
Mhm.
World War One,
Mhm.
not theories, gangs of veterans roaming the streets with combat experience,
Mhm.
the genuine crisis of capitalism to the degree where
Mhm.
the hyperinflation of early post-war Europe, the concatenation of factors that led to the emergence of an entirely new political order that many people
Mhm.
within Germany and Italy didn't find legitimate. I would say a state form that is actually bureaucratically immature and is able to be taken over in a genuine way. I go against most people here. I don't think that Trump has yet demonstrated he's been able to totally take over the American state. I don't think that's happened yet. And then you have sort of these inter-imperial rivalries of the early 20th century. None of those, I would say, core features of fascism hold today. What you have is a far-right ideology in fascism that, like all far-right ideologies, far-right ideology in fascism, a far-right ideology today, and there's obvious family resemblances because far-right ideologies have family resemblances, just like liberal ideologies have family resemblances and left-wing ideologies have family resemblances. But what's happening here is a uniquely American thing, I would argue, linked very peculiarly to American institutions in the context of the United States in the 2020s. So I don't understand what doing fascism gets you. Oh, and then one more thing. Fascism is also an ideology of a mass political era, which is very much not the era we live in today. Sorry.
Well, I think that one way in which the concept of fascism might be operative here is that among Trump and among his supporters and advisors, I think they see a playbook in how the Weimar Republic was undone and how the party state of the Third Reich was established. I don't think that it's a coincidence that certain institutions and certain professions, certain power centers outside of the state, things like the constitutional law firms that have been one of the major whipping boys of the Trump administration and have been forced to submit to extravagant sanctions from the government in order to continue
That's far-right
operating.
ideology. This is what far-right governments do, right? If you're going to make the claim to fascism, it has to be actually linked to fascism, as opposed to a general family resemblance.
Distinguish far-right ideology from fascism, right? Yeah. I think that you're right that a lot of far-right ideologies have family resemblances, and I don't know. Flipping it on its head, I don't know what the delineation of saying that this is a uniquely American form of far-right authoritarianism that has nothing to do with fascism. I don't know what that gets you either.
Because diagnosing something actually helps you identify a cure. And understanding this is emergent from American institutions in the American context is the only way that we're actually going to be able to combat it. Relating it to a mass political form of the 1920s and 1930s, Italy and Germany, is just not going to give us any sort of insight into actually how to combat Trump. That's why I think it's important. It's so different.
So tell me, how do you combat Trump?
I think you actually have to start building. Okay. Sorry, I think you have to rein in the power of the presidency. I mean, this is the big problem of American history. I think you have to start building a generational project, basically. I mean, if you have to ask me honestly, I don't think we're going to do it. I think that ship has sailed, and we probably lost. But if you're going to say that if we have a strategy,
then we're at the exact same place as the people who misdiagnose it according to fascism, right? You
pessimism
don't have any cure at all, whereas in theory they would have the wrong cure. But what if their diagnosis produces a more useful?
It hasn't. It hasn't. I think that was also the political language of the Kamala Harris campaign the last couple of weeks, and I just think people don't buy it because Americans aren't stupid and they understand that things are different. What I would do, I mean, pessimism of the intellect, I don't think we're going to do it. Optimism of the will, I think we basically have to center the presidency as a problematic institution. I think that there is a serious problem in the separation of powers in this country, that Congress has essentially abdicated its responsibility on a number of issues related specifically to war, immigration, and national security. And I also think that there's been an oligarchic concentration of power in the upper capitalist class. So those are the two major problems facing our country, which again, don't really have anything to do with interwar fascism. Okay. So I would say focus on those problems. develop strategy. At first, identify those as the problems, not fascism, and then start building a political coalition over time to rein in the presidency and rein in the power of oligarchic capitalism. Again, pessimism of the intellect, don't think that's going to happen. Optimism of the will, that's a place that we would need to focus on.
Okay, so I would see things differently. I think that they're in the establishment and the entrenchment of right-wing authoritarianism under a far-right ideology, call it fascism, call it not fascism, call it Amero-fascism. There's certain steps, there's certain processes that need to take place before you can disappear people just collectively with impunity, before you can call off elections, these kinds of things. And
we've been disappearing people for decades, though. I just really need to underline that. We've been disappearing people for, I would say, the modern era of immigration begins in the late 1920s with the deportation of, I have the exact number in my article, but it's hundreds of thousands of Mexican and Mexican Americans forcibly deported. So I would say there's been a modern deportation machine, to borrow the term of the historian Adam Goodman, for a century, in which citizens and legal residents, usually Mexicans, usually Latin Americans, have been swept up. So I just want to underline that as something that's been happening for about a century.
Okay. There's also been the wartime internment of the Japanese, and the
term now is incarceration. Just so everyone listening, the term that now scholars use is incarceration. By the way, implemented by executive order by FDR. FDR was the one who did 3,700 executive orders. I think whatever 37,921, if I'm getting it correctly. Orders of magnitude over. Now, obviously, we all agree with what FDR was doing because he did it for good and not for ill. But that's a problem when people govern through the executive branch, which has been going on since the New Deal.
Okay, so sure, you can.
So I just have to address the comment in the comment that Prester John says Nazis learned Jim Crow, reservations, internment camps, forced labor, eugenics, mass surveillance, mass genocide from the U.S. That is incorrect. That is a form of American negative exceptionalism. The Nazis, when they came to the Nuremberg laws, apparently did look, according to the book Hitler's American Model by James Q. Whitman, actually quite a short book that has become the center of the American left for some reasons, interpretation of Nazi Germany. There's plenty of precedent in European history for the genocide of European Jewry. And I think that Americans need to be careful not to center themselves in the story of the Holocaust. It's wrong. It's empirically wrong. It's historically wrong. And it actually, I think, dishonors the people who did die in the Holocaust. And people need to be careful about extending the argument of Whitman into something that I don't think he ever intended, to make basically the United States responsible for the Holocaust, which just is not accurate. Sorry, Kuba. I just wanted to address that comment.
No, so my concern, or rather, you've observed like very deep structural constitutional problems as the foundation for this abuse of power, or this negative use of power, whatever you want to call it, by Donald Trump, right? As just an extension of things that have always taken place. The fact that everything is taking place out in the open, and that there's been such a brazen defiance of court orders, of federal judgments, that level of impunity, well, the fact that it's visible, the fact that it's overt, does represent something new, and does represent something extremely disturbing, because previous administrations have at least made the effort.
They haven't been as public about it. Yeah, they haven't. The difference is they haven't been as public about it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely, and the case. True.
And that is a very big difference, right? What is conducted in secrecy and what is concealed away from not just the general public, but also opposition elements within the ruling elite. It's precisely because there are avenues to block those types of actions that they're concealed, right? That there might be electoral or a reaction from within the legal establishment, from within the judiciary, from within other elements of the governing apparatus. And that division of powers is supposed to be a feature, that checks and balances, call it what you will, is supposed to be a feature that limits the ability for this kind of presidential unilateral extension of of authority, right? Extra constitutional abuse of authority, let's say. And what's extraordinary and what is fascist like in the second term of Donald Trump is the fact that this has become overt and that there's an attempt to try to collapse the contradiction in favor of an unapologetic, untrammeled, limitless exercise of executive authority. And not only that, but build up a cadre that's able to use force at the unilateral behest of the executive and purge the judiciary, purge the federal bureaucracy, purge the security agencies of those who might go along with the watered down version of this, but object to the, to the full calorie Coca-Cola.
I think it's a fair point. Just a very quick thing. I can have to address the comments. Look up the Herero and Nama genocide, which was prosecuted by Germans in German Southwest Africa. It's actually the first genocide of the 20th century. Okay, so yes, Kuba. I think it's a little bit early days to be making those claims. Basically, Elon Musk is co-president. All of a sudden, he can't be seen. Right. So that is my basic claim. I think we have to wait and see what actually happens before we start making those maximalist claims. Although we should, like you said, pay attention to them. Well, absolutely.
Here's the thing: we wait and see, and then they get away with it.
Well, the problem is there's no way for us to affect anything. We're all spectators in this anyway. But that's another level of constitutional crisis that I've been writing about for over a decade, is that we really live in a non-democratic country where ordinary people have almost no say over what happens. So we could talk about it. However, we should talk about it, but it's not like we're going to really be able to shape what's going on.
Look, the individual actions under certain circumstances do matter. And there's different qualities of ordinary people. Not everyone is Elon Musk, of course, but some people have more access to judicial resources. Some people have more access to, personal connections with people who are no longer ordinary people.
Just very quickly, there's a study done in 2014 that is very influential on me and is pretty robust by Gillens and Page that basically shows that organized business has influence and organized people don't have influence. That even if people organize
in 2014,
from 2014, it's Gillens and Page.
Is this the one about preferences expressed through Congress?
Let me see. Testing theories of American politics, elites, interest groups, and average citizens. And it basically shows that average citizens have no impact on
that's absolutely true.
Decision making.
That's absolutely true. But an average citizen is potentially also part of an organization, and potentially enough average citizens form an interest group.
But the average citizens' interest groups don't have an impact. That's what I'm saying. The organized average citizens don't impact things. It's only basically capitalists organized that shape things. So this is a big problem. Yeah.
Look out.
Here, I'll put a link in the.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put a link in the chat. Oh, I can't join. I'm going to send it to Jason in the private chat. But yeah, this is the paper, and I think it's really quite interesting, and it really just shows that. And let me just read it. It's multivariate analysis indicates that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence, just like the long and short of it. So that's a big problem, which I think, gets into this like constitutional crisis, which again has very little to do with fascism. Not using fascism does not point us in any of the directions that I think we need to understand what's actually going on with in this country.
I think that you have a very strong point on
thank you
when it comes to the underlying structural causes, big picture forces, sure, but there's also a technique, and perhaps you object just to the use of the label fascism for it, but if you're going to roll back the things like judicial protections for over habeas corpus, the limitations to the arbitrary use of executive authority, opportunities to express opinions that dissent with those of governing power, there is a playbook. There are techniques that I think have been learned from the 1930s by the Trump administration.
Well, what specifically are you referring? Like, so I've like done like I've wasted my life studying in detail the German rise to power, and it actually does not look similar at all to what Trump is doing. So I'm curious what you're thinking. People who are interested in this should actually read a book by this historian named Donna Harsh, who talks about how like the socialists made like a million wrong moves in trying to oppose Hitler's rise to power. But to me, this actually doesn't really echo at all what happened in either Italy or Nazi Germany in terms of a playbook. So I'm curious what you're referring to specifically. Particularly, the real issue is that there's no like brown shirts. Right. There's no like mass-based organizations of veterans who are using violence on the streets of Berlin in order to bully people and make political arguments. There's no lost generation of World War I. There's no genuine crisis of capitalism as occurred in the Great Depression. It just seems actually very, very different from what happened in the middle of the 20th century in Germany and Italy.
I'm thinking of Hermann Göring and the purge of the Prussian state bureaucracy. The
Preußenschlag. I think that's Franz von Papen, and that's in the summer of 32. Yeah, and that was a big deal. But that was also, you have to remember, the Social Democrats actually ran the Berlin police. You know, which is like just a very different situation in terms of like what's going on here. The Preußenschlag, I think you're referring to, and so that is just again like had to do with armed militant groups seizing the state. Which again is just not what's happening here.
Beyond the armed militant groups seizing the state, and we'll see if it gets to that with the consolidation of one of the big things that I would look for in order to settle. You know, when you say it's too soon to tell, and I wrote this in my piece with Ben and Jacobin, to the extent to which the domestic security agencies, DHS, ICE, if they get expanded, if Trump is able to hire another 100,000 operatives, or if Eric Prince gets his contract for private security to augment the mass deportation process, then you begin to have brown shirts, right? They do not necessarily come from the same milieu.
So then brown shirts just mean armed agents. I mean, actually, it's not brown shirts because the brown shirts were connected to the Nazi Party, right? That's different. So you're just, I mean, again, this is the problem with the fascists. That's so general, so that any armed militant group is now fascist. Again, armed militant groups, bad, very bad. Don't like them. But ICE is not the brown shirts. The brown shirts were an organization of a political party. ICE is just the permanent bureaucratic element of the state created during the War on Terror that has been used extensively by both political parties. That's very different from brown shirts.
Wait, so when did the brown shirts become the SA? Yeah.
Sturmabteilung. They were the same thing.
When did they get recognition from the state, and when did they start?
There's the purge in 34 of Rome, right? So what Hitler does is he actually gets into power, and the brown shirts become a liability, and he winds up purging them. But they're basically crucial to the rise to power in the 20s and the early 30s. And then he just uses the German state forces, right? Like Goering is the head of the Minister of the Interior. And so that's police.
And that's the head of when Goering as head of the Ministry of the Interior is the purge that I was referring to, of the state bureaucracies that were responsible for
that's different from the
Weimar Germany. Yes, which wasn't what I referred to. You know, you're the one who brought that up.
So I think you said Prussia, which is Goering does it on the national level. So that is, I think, again, very dissimilar to whatever's going to happen here.
We'll see. I mean, Kash Patel and the spate of firings over not just DEI, not just ideological, not just nominally budgetary grounds, but also ideological loyalty tests, personal loyalty tests within the CIA, within the FBI, within all of the branches.
That Harry Truman instituted in 1948. I mean, Harry Truman instituted via executive order, literally a loyalty oath. And then right after that, his attorney general basically made it illegal to be a left-wing organization. Again, America.
So the fact that this,
that's what I'm saying. It's not fascist. It's American. And to understand it, you have to use arguably it through the American institution.
Fair enough. And America has been fascist. Period. Right.
Well, then fascism just means everything. As I wrote in the article, then fascism both precedes and postdates its actual European instantiation, which is again just functioning as a political curse word and not functioning as an analytical term, which is how it's mostly used. Which is fine, but it's not useful as a political term, as demonstrated by Kamala Harris losing the election.
The way that Kamala Harris uses it isn't the only way that it can be used, and there's also if you're talking to normies, which most people are, right? Not everyone lives in the same bubble. Not everyone, as you pointed out, has wasted their lives.
Wasted their lives.
Yeah. Has and burnt out their souls and is so completely black-pilled that at this point they're just sitting back with their popcorn waiting to see what flavor of dystopia plays out. If they want to understand what's happening right now, and the argument being made is, don't worry, it's not fascism. It's always been America.
No, I'm not saying don't worry. America. People add that. I never said
okay.
Don't
worry
a lot.
It's America. No, but it's America.
Yeah. This is if worry a lot.
I mean, that's the name of your article. Like, this is America. And it's America. True that there's an entire segment of the Zoomer generation, the people younger than us, for whom America is synonymous with precisely what you're describing. America has always disappeared people. America has always taken people's land. America has always had the arbitrary use of force and closed anti-democratic politics. And you may fight one battle trying to convince people that aren't part of that demographic, that haven't wasted their lives, et cetera, that of that fundamental truth, which is only a partial truth, incidentally. The America is also the other stuff.
Yeah, the dialectic of enlightenment. It is also the other stuff. Agreed.
Exactly. Yes. It's also the other stuff. And for the people for whom America is only the other stuff, the category of fascism, with all the badness that it connotes, and with the more granular forms of authoritarianism that emerge from it, the disappearances, the extrajudicial abuse of political power, they don't want to hear about the unitary executive. They hear, oh, this is America. They think, well, we'll just vote him out the next election.
Well, we actually,
and precisely that is one of the things that's in question. Will there be a next election? Right? If this goes the other way, then you will have the consolidation of a far-right ideology within the security apparatus, within the very center of American institutional power. You will have an established ruling party that has absolute contempt for judicial review, for any of the nominal checks and balances that are supposed to prevent it from this type of behavior. And then you can say, well, this is where America was always going.
A couple of quick points. I think we actually have a pretty good empirical tests of whether the term you're basically saying the term fascism is a politically useful term. That was literally the closing argument, quote Vox. That was Vox's term. Maybe it was the Times. I forget. Vox or the Times, of the Kamala Harris campaign, and people didn't buy it. And people didn't buy it because it doesn't
people
ring
didn't
true.
buy anything that Kamala Harris was selling.
So okay.
She could tell them that
whatever.
It was raining in the middle of Hurricane.
Okay, but whatever. So there's an empirical test there, and then I think I forgot my other point. Unfortunately,
well, no, I'm suggesting a different explanation that falsifies that complicates your empirical test, right? If there were positive there were true claims that Kamala Harris was making that also failed to sway
okay,
people.
so then we just keep on running this test until we determine whether fascism is useful. Fine. What would you say about something like Obama's kill list?
Obama's bad.
But again, how does that relate to what you're saying about the theory of the unitary executive?
That do I think that it fits in with the theory of the unitary executive, that it is a logical extension? Yes. The theory of the unitary executive, as articulated during the original George W. Bush era of the War on Terror, created this impunity around
which Trump is an intensification.
Yes.
Right. And that has nothing to do with
Trump
fascism.
is not just an intensification, but the unitary executive, as I understood it, was principally applied to jurisdictions outside of the United States. It was nominally kind of wartime or foreign policy application, consequence of the commander-in-chief powers of the presidency, and one of the current battlegrounds in American jurisprudence is the extent to which Trump can invoke things like the Alien Enemies Act and
the Internal Security Act, the early Cold War Act. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just
unilaterally
I do gotta go.
as members of course.
Yeah, sorry, I do got to go.
So,
but I just I'm looking at that very quickly. The comments in the chat. It wasn't just Harris saying that one thing fascism. Actually, look into what the campaign did in the last 2-3 weeks. Yeah, whatever. People are misunderstanding my argument. That's fine. Read my article. Jason, I gotta go.
I know you gotta go. Take it easy, Danny. Thank you so much for hanging
Thanks,
out with
Kuba.
us.
I'm glad we could go at each other, but
have a great interview.
Bye. Bye.
Wow. And we had to get him out of here because he's got a big interview he's doing for his podcast at 8:45. So I wanted to make sure we got him out of here on time. It was interesting because originally this was just going to be me and Danny, and then Cooper was like, I want in. And then he sharpened the lightsaber a little bit.
Yeah, the I got spicy, right?
It's different times for you guys. So Danny is just hopped up on caffeine, and you're nice and calm in your mysterious
Canadian
setting. Yeah.
Yeah, frankly, I think that a lot of it came down to his very specific and particular understanding of what the term fascism means and how to use it. Mm-hmm. Right? It feels a little like using the term communism just to describe the Soviet Union between 1920 and 1938, right? And like Brezhnev, forget that. That's not communism, or rather, Mao. That's not communism. That's just China with different wallpaper.
Communism is when the state does stuff.
Exactly. Communism is when the state does stuff for people I don't like. And
fascism is when Trump does stuff. That's all you need to know. If you want to know what it boils down to, fascism is when Trump does stuff.
No, I think that we did get to a point where we did sharpen the distinction between Danny's take and my take. And I see things like Kash Patel running the FBI, mm-hmm. the massive purge of the deep state, right? And perhaps that's because it's a little closer to my heart than Danny's. The reorientation of the American security apparatus towards explicitly furthering a MAGA agenda, to the point where people are getting fired for not taking the president's agenda seriously enough, right? Not being enthusiastic enough over his policy choices. That happened to the commander of the Greenland Air Force Base, where Vance made his appearance. So the fact that you have a president and a political movement around that president reaching down into agencies and institutions that previously had a certain level of independence respected around a bipartisan consensus in their operation, that is a new departure, right? One of the characteristics of totalitarianism, whether of the left or of the right, is the establishment of a party state, the merging together of the administration of power that's supposed to be neutral, that's supposed to be in the service of the abstract permanent state or nation, with that of a political movement, and especially a political movement with a leader that is empowered to articulate the direction of the entire collective, the entire nation. And we're seeing that with Trump, right? He's reaching down into the Department of Justice. He's reaching down into the military. He's reaching down as far as he can go. He's trying to reach down into individual universities. He's trying to tell Harvard what its faculty and student ratios and makeup should be. He's succeeded in getting Columbia to go to heel, and he's become much more emboldened as a result of that. So this one can point to antecedents, right? Abuses during the Cold War, McCarthyism, you name it. But one, right, like the other side of the dialectic is that these episodes end, and they end not because of the Soviets liberating Hollywood. That's not what brings McCarthyism to a close. It comes to an end because of the internal dynamics of American institutions. And two, they are then retroactively looked on as abuses and aberrations. That's not enough of the case to make it necessarily true, right? The positive side of the coin is not the only one, but the view that all of the abuses in the Trumpian second term that we've seen so far, and with the potential to go a lot further. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think he's only getting started. And I think that, ironically, one of the disjunctions, one of the fundamental differences that Danny identifies between the 1930s condition of interwar Europe, the level of economic dysfunction and decay, the tariff wars, the breakdown of trade with China, which is America's most crucial and deeply consequential economic relationship, that could very well induce the exact level and type of economic dysfunction that Danny Bessner is arguing, we haven't seen yet and is required to be in a fascist moment. Similarly, think about all the people who are getting fired from the CIA and the FBI and all of the other security apparatus agencies, all of the security agencies in the federal government, all of these people who are going to go out into unemployment and into a terrible Trump economy with skills around things like counter surveillance, right? Espionage, infiltration. There you go. Congratulations. Now you have your traumatized, unemployed, embittered veterans as well. What's the target for culling out of the Department of Defense? I believe it's in the hundreds of thousands. So it remains to be seen. Absolutely. And Daniel Bessner is right about that. Whether or not Trump can do this, he could still fail. But the program, the agenda, is to create an authoritarian far right system of government, and one which will resist constitutional change, and one which has the ability to crush through extra constitutional coercive means attempts to organize against it.
Ben Burgess, who's been watching the show, was like, "Hey, I have my 2 cents. I'd like to throw in this arena."
Is this like a tag team situation? You know, I get a bit of a breather. And
Burgess
then...
from the corner. Oh no! Look who just walked in. It's Big Ben Burgess.
Yeah, I've got my chair here.
You got the chair.
I need to get wrestling music when this happens. If I would have known Ben was going to watch the show, I would have totally set something up stupid like that.
Yeah, no, I've been watching on and off. I'm actually in a hotel room in Santa Clarita, California, because I'm on my way up to San Francisco, where Jason and I are going to be doing a live show tomorrow night at the El Rio at 6:00. But yeah, I mean, I guess I do kind of think that both of you guys are sort of identifying parts of the elephant here, right? I mean, the sort of classic, cheesy analogy, right, about the blind man with the elephant, like that. I like something I think that you've undeniably been right about, Kuba, is that it's not like Trumpism 2.0, right? Isn't business as usual, right? And it's not like Trumpism 1.0. You could kind of tell yourself that this was just like this sort of rhetorically bizarre version of what any Republican president would have been, basically, that you kind of went down the list of all of the horrible all of the horrible things that Trump did, and he did plenty, but like most of them were the kinds of things that were horrible things that Mitt Romney would have done, right, if he'd won in 2012, right? I mean, Trump just had the sort of affect of like of this like weird sociopathic reality TV show host as he did it, right? I mean, but like the rolling back of abortion rights, the union busting, the deregulation, right? I mean, this was all just kind of Reaganism, right? And I think something that you called like correctly, right, and importantly, last year, is that there are these reasons to suspect that Trumpism 2.0 might be a lot worse than that. That the sort of theory of the case that a lot of the Trumpists themselves had about Trump 1 was that they didn't deliver their vision of American greatness, because they were being politically cock-blocked from within the administration, and and that this time, the whole point of a lot of that Project 2025 stuff, et cetera, was to make sure that didn't happen, right? So, I mean, that's something you definitely convinced me of enough that I wrote an article with you about it last year. We said don't count out that MAGA dystopia just yet. So I think that's totally correct, right? That there is something that's authoritarian and dangerous and new, right, about this, right? I think that's like at this point, I think 3 months in, that's kind of undeniable, right? That there's sort of frighteningly new stuff going on here. But I guess I do want to, I guess this is the point where I throw the chair at you, that like, I do want to kind of stand up for like, I don't think that the sort of distinction that Danny is making is just sort of like semantic nitpicking or some like kind of insanely narrow definition of fascism that it's like, sure, if you're going to restrict it to that, I guess, but like, what's the point of that? Because like I could imagine situations in which like we would say like, okay, sure, you have like some historically grounded definition of fascism, so you need to say this isn't fascism, but like kind of who cares, right? Like if this like on some of the sort of classic Marxist analyses of what fascism was, it's like unclear whether Pinochet's Chile counts as like according to Hoyle fascism, but the sort of cash value of that distinction, if you're a Chilean leftist in 1973, is like non-existent, right? Like it's not important to you whether the people dangling you from the helicopters are officially, dictionary definition fascists or not. And I actually don't really think that's the situation. And I mean, I think it is sort of telling and significant here that, none of us have left, right? I mean, even like Jason is doing the show from Mexico, but like that's not because he's fleeing fascism, right? It's just because it's like more affordable. Like he drives back to the U.S. all the time, right? Like, I do think that there is, like, if you really thought that full-on literal fascists had taken over your country, I think you would leave. I think you would, I think you would either, I think you would either leave, you would go underground, or you would start a civil war if you thought that you could be backed up by a large enough percentage of the population to do that, right? I think there is, and I think there's a range of frighteningly authoritarian things that can happen that are well short of that. I mean, like if, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of why, like, I've written all this stuff where I like try to get people to like go back to like look at some of the like weird, horrible authoritarian things that have happened before. That like Dwight D. Eisenhower, right? We had the use of the military in mass deportation operations. Since this was before the invention of shame, it was called Operation Wetback. That was the official name. And you also had like the Communist Control Act, right? That, made the Communist Party like officially illegal for a minute. The point is not like, oh, that was fine, right? I think that what happened in the 50s was, was awful. And I mean, like in some ways, the idea that it could be very frightening. The idea that things might get something like that bad is actually like extremely frightening. Like in the 50s, a lot of radicals, like had their passports taken away, right? They weren't allowed to leave anymore, right? They wouldn't be able to come back, if they did. I mean, that's that would be incredibly scary if that happened. But I guess I do wonder if it is useful to make some of these distinctions just because, like, I don't know, even like having some humility here and like frankly admitting that we have no idea how bad things could get, like which I certainly don't. I mean, I've given up pretending that, that I know exactly how bad things could get because I really don't. I feel like the point where I am sympathetic to, Danny's perspective in sort of saying like, hey, it matters how you diagnose the disease for like how you think about cures, is that, a lot of the ways that sort of past authoritarian things have, that have happened in the US that people have responded to it, with lawsuits, with union organizing, with just trying to win the next election, right? Are things that would be sort of flatly irrelevant if you just, if you were living in like Italy after the March on Rome, right? Or Germany after the burning of the Reichstag, right? So I mean, I think it might be, I do wonder if there is like a sort of productive middle ground where we say, yeah, this is new and dangerous and authoritarian, but it might not be the same dangerous thing, and that might actually impact how we respond to it.
Okay. So there's a lot there, and thank you for co-writing the article with me, and thank you for everything that you said before the but. I don't mean to dismiss entirely the distinction that Daniel was making, conditions are very different than interwar Europe. Absolutely true. The structure of society, very different. Absolutely true. Political economy, very different. Absolutely true. The forms of political mobilization, forms of political contestation, where are the mass parties, where are the street fighters, where are the militias? Sure, there's a lot of differences. I mean, the internet exists in this day and age. We have color movies, right? There's a lot that's different between these two settings. And perhaps if you just add up all of the technological progress and social change, you get to a environment which is so distinctive that these labels are no longer at all meaningful, right? Like Zoomer fascism done through social influencers, right? Maybe that's its own completely different thing, right? Like trad wives, is that the same as Kinderkuchen Kirche? I don't know, right? So all of that is well taken, and I'm not wed to the label of fascism. If you want to call this neo-phalangism with American characteristics, go right ahead. If we want to call it, what was our term? Leninist Calhounism, right? Let it be. I do think that I'm actually pretty worried that you're still in the US. And I don't think that's wise. And I'm not telling this just to you, although I think that as actual Marxist commentators, you're on a list somewhere, right? You're pretty far down on it because your view counts aren't that high. But like, if nobody stops them, then they will send Hassan Piker to CCOT. That's gonna happen. The question is, can they pull it off? Like, will somebody stop them? Will they be too incompetent to pull it off? Will the economy imploding mean that you have enough billionaires pulling their interests in MAGA and mobilizing some kind of internal opposition order that things go the other way? That's possible. But they're already disappearing people, and not just brown people, and not just Palestinian activists either. There have been several cases of people from, the sort of countries that the chat would happily damn to hell as US puppets and allies, like Germany, Canada, the UK, that have vanished into ICE detention for periods of time. One guy was taken in, green card holder, no outstanding criminal cases, arrested for nothing. He was just coming back. Fabian Schmidt, by all means, look him up. He was just coming back from a trip to Luxembourg. And in Logan Airport, he's detained. They decide that they don't like his attitude, and he vanishes into ICE detention. The only reason that we even know he's in ICE detention is because he was denied essential medication. He had an episode, and when he was in the hospital getting treatment, he was able to contact his mother. But he's been in there for a month. Nobody knows what's going to happen to him. And this is not somebody who even falls under any of the categories, any of the traditional categories that Trump was targeting. The hot mic incident with Bukele, where Trump said, you're going to need 5 more CCOTs because we're going to be sending American citizens your way. Well, we now have the precedent that if they pick you up by mistake, by an admitted mistake, so you've done nothing wrong, and you end up in CCOT, you just stay there. This is not something that that was happening out in the open as part of established unapologetic U.S. policy. And now, you know, if you say anything nice about Palestine or anything critical of Israel, that's enough of a reason to get you on a list. And being on a list, I mean, that's not even necessary to get you black bagged and sent to El Salvador. And then you're gone. Now, there's obviously been an escalation, right? It starts with people who are MS-13 members, and then people who are plausibly enough, that look enough like MS-13 members, so that if you throw them all together, you can, you know, mix them in. Nobody will notice. And they got away with that. And now they just pick up people by mistake. They just pick up people in order to fill quotas. There are cases that haven't even broke into the mainstream news. There were a group of Bhutanese green card holders, people who have green cards. You cannot be more legal than that without being a U.S. citizen. They had come over to the United States as refugees because they belonged to a Nepali ethnic group that had been severely persecuted by the Bhutanese government, and through programs with the United Nations going back to the Clinton era and going, you know, operating through the early 2000s, a large community of them was resettled inside the United States and eventually got their green cards and were on the path to citizenship. Everything seemed fine. A few of these guys were arrested and charged with misdemeanors. The most significant case was a man who had been involved in a bar fight, and I think he served time. The rest were things like public drunkenness, trespassing, open and shut. I don't even know if there was a criminal record attached to them, but these are things that are settled with fines or community service. And they had done the community service. They had paid the fines. This was all years in the past. One day, ICE shows up, picks up these guys, they vanish, and now they're stuck on the border between India and Bhutan, because Bhutan is still persecuting that ethnic minority and refuses to recognize them as citizens. Their entire lives have been ruined, vanished completely. No due process, no judicial review, categorically illegal and abusive behavior. And all of this is happening routinely. It's been routinized and it's being normalized in front of your eyes. That you guys are at risk. This is really dangerous. I think that, and forgive me for resorting to standpoint epistemology, but you guys are Americans. You don't have like the family lore, you know, of running away from a totalitarian country. Your parents haven't taught you what the signs are, right? Like when this starts happening, start hoarding gold and start figuring out how to get your hands on documents, because visas are going to be difficult to come by. I was invited to a conference in June, arms manufacturers, and it had to be called off because of anxieties about international travel and Doge layoffs, right? If your own military industrial complex is alarmed at this behavior enough so that it changes its schedule, then something very, very serious is going on. I don't know what to tell you guys, right?
I mean, I certainly think, something serious is going on. I do wonder, right, about a version of this conversation that we could have had, for example, in 23 years ago, right? That, like where we talked about the hundreds of people who had been swept up off the streets after 9/11 and indefinitely detained. We talked about the legislative abolition of the Fourth Amendment with the Patriot Act. And we talked about what would have, perhaps just happened at the point we were having the conversation, which is that, Jose Padilla, who was actually an American citizen, had just been indefinitely detained, and said, okay, like this is, we can see, we can see where this is trending, we can see where this is escalating, and so, sooner or later, Noam Chomsky is going to be in Guantanamo Bay. And I don't bring that up, I know it probably sounds like it is, but it's genuinely not my intention to sort of minimize the awfulness and scariness of what's going on right now, because it is awful and it is scary, right? But rather to say, I wonder about, the lesson you're drawing here. Because, points for consistency. I think 99.999% of people who have the same position that you do don't say you should leave, right? Like, that's actually an extraordinarily rare combination of positions. But I do wonder with that takeaway, right? Because I think that in retrospect, I suspect that we would have agreed that would have been the wrong response to, to the Bush ramp up of authoritarianism after 9/11, and not just because, like, for some complacent reason it didn't turn out to be that bad, right? But because if there is a chance, right, like that you have a better political outcome in the United States, then it does seem like it's undermining the possibility of that happening if everybody over a certain level of prominence, which, as you point out, is the one offensive thing you said and all that, Jason and I are not that high up on, right? But like if everybody over a certain level of prominence, sort of self-deported in that situation, then that does seem like it everybody, Ben and Jason on up, right? Left the country. It does seem like that's bad for the possibility of bringing about a better political outcome in the United States. Now, if the writing was on the wall so much that, like, we were in a situation, Germany after the burning of the Reichstag, Chile in 1973, like if we were in that situation, it would still be the right call, right? But but like my concern about sort of, for all of the very horrible and very true things that you said about, things that have happened, right? I do, like my concern about the downside of taking that advice when you're not quite in that situation is that, like, that does seem like a way of letting these guys win.
So, if I may, if from the perspective of somebody who's trying to lead their life and doesn't have a set of strong bonds to a particular community, obligations, or calling for political mobilization, yeah, you should probably just leave. If you stay because you think you can do something, then you're doing a good thing. Like you said, if you're going to stop this, if this is going to be stopped, then people will have to take some action. It's not necessarily a process that will take care of itself. And I don't think that it's a situation in which a Daniel Bessner level of, well, ordinary people can't do anything at all, necessarily is justified, right? I think that the situation is both much grimmer than Hugh would point out, and that precisely for that reason, individuals, even regular people can end up having a lot more agency in those circumstances. After all, the Soviet Union came to an end because of mass mobilization of ordinary people. And not just the Soviet Union, but there's been different types of anti-authoritarian revolutions as a result of mass mobilization, sometimes occurring very quickly over a short amount of time. I would say that the situation is much more serious than in 2001 in the post 9/11 spike of authoritarianism and executive overreach. For instance, one of the problems that they had after 9/11 and after especially the launch of the Iraq War was operatives inside the intelligence agencies and the security apparatus, the Department of Defense, people with long careers and a great deal of regional expertise, quit. They weren't fired, they quit. And this led to internal bureaucratic problems. What's happening now is actual purges of the exact agencies that would be able to push back internally against the most flagrant kinds of abuses that the Trump administration seems to be drifting towards, right? We're talking about Department of Justice lawyers that are fired for ever investigating Donald Trump or prosecuting the January 6th protesters. Not only that, but the people who are now in charge of those agencies, they have a very clear hiring priority, right? They are going to be looking for loyal foot soldiers who won't complain when it comes time to round up Ben Burgess. The same is true of the Department of Defense. The same is true of the CIA, the NSA. We talk about these groups as NatSec ghouls, the worst of the worst, right? Enablers of imperialism. And a lot of that is true. Most of that is true. That's their day job. But one element of the American security apparatus, one essential cultural characteristic that was entrenched after World War II, precisely to get away from the risk of a Führerprinzip type far-right takeover, was this constitutionally oriented liberal indoctrination. Constitution, Constitution. I swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to the president. Constitution, Constitution. Bill of Rights, President, President. Not President, not President, right? And that is being dismantled right before our eyes. And the individuals, the institutional leaders who might have been in a position to prevent that are being identified and summarily dismissed and replaced with people who are more pliable. So it's worse than 2001. In 2001, and I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, Guantanamo Bay was a really big deal, and it was very, very, very bad that it existed. It should have been shut down. It shocked the conscience of the world, and it really represented a new milestone in barbarity, especially from a country which was still positioning itself as the post-war standard bearer of democracy, human rights, and liberalism, freedom. But now we've got Gitmo and CCOT, and they're just sending people who they admit have done nothing to CCOT and disappearing them forever. That is different. And
I certainly don't disagree that, I certainly don't disagree that it's different, right? I mean, I think that the point I'm making there is not that like this is exactly the same, and the outer limit of barbarity that was reached in the Bush administration is the worst thing that can ever happen. That's like a law of nature. That that's as bad as American authoritarianism can ever get. because I think that would clearly be false, right? Like, I think that this, it's, I mean, there are individual things you can point to. I mean, I think it is a little bit complicated because I think technically speaking, some of the war on terror stuff that happened with Bush and even under Obama is in certain respects worse, right? That Trump hasn't yet, openly killed any American citizens, right? And tried them with posthumous presidential speech, like Obama did. So I mean, I think if you're just kind of like looking at like individual incidents and grading it on an absolute curve, I think it's a little bit messy, but I actually also don't think that's the most useful way to sort of measure what's happening here. I think that I think that the sort of brazenness of how much Trump has done, how quickly like actually does put us in uncharted waters, right? Like I don't want that to be let go. I mean, this is the thing that I started all of this by saying that I agree with you about, right? And I mean, this is kind of like the whole context of the conversation here is a little bit funny because I have, because I'm arguing with you, and I actually do think you bet that in Lenin's terminology, I think you bend the stick a little bit too far in this direction. But 99% of the time in the last few months, if I was arguing with anybody else, I sound like you. Right, like that's like I'm not, I mean, I kind of have it. You watch like my show, right? With its paltry view counts. Haven't forgotten that dig motherfucker. But you watch my show over the last few months, and I'm like nonstop, talking about civil liberties and like how dangerous this is, and and all of that, right? So I don't. I don't disagree with that at all, right? I mean, I think that authoritarianism can and does get worse. And to just quickly repeat something I already said, I don't pretend to know how bad it can get, right? But I do worry about prematurely conceding defeat, which is to me like the kind of most important thing here that actually matters, right? Because it's like otherwise we're sort of arguing about the semantics of fascism, and which you've kind of said you don't care that much about anyway, right? Like and it's sort of it really would be quite irrelevant, right? Like to like sort of if we're just like sort of if the situation we're in is that we're all like in front of the firing squad and we're spending our last moments on Earth sharing a cigarette and arguing about exactly how we should classify the people who are about to shoot us, historically, right? I mean, like if that were the situation, I agree that would be quite silly, right? But the thing, yeah.
So.
Two people have been killed by firing squad in the last month, by the way. Just want to throw that
in the
United States, South Carolina.
That's actually one of the as they keep going back and forth over the years about what methods you're allowed to use. Like I think that one's been consistently upheld as being fine, which is kind of amazing.
In my lifetime, I don't know anyone that's gotten killed by firing squad that I can think of in the United States.
There was a dude in Utah.
My understanding,
in like the 90s.
We just hit 800, by the way. Take that, Kubo.
Well,
this is what matters most here.
I mean, the great also. Now you're on a worse list.
he just hit 800. What is it? Where are they coming from? Twitch?
Oh, well, that's a level 4, actually. That happens. hit 800. That happens when you're on the better list. Anyway, like if you, of course, you know, if you want to stay and push back against this, one thing that's absolutely true is they don't win until resistance is crushed, right? As long as there are people who are willing to not comply, then you have the opportunity to slow down this whole process. And it's still, we're not talking about a consolidated authoritarian regime either. They can screw it up. This is still in its infancy, right? It's still a hatchling. And the more people who are there to push back against it, the better. The more likely that it will never grow up. I think that if you're going to do that, and this is where Bessner and I part ways, and this is where I think that the concept of fascism and the example of the decline of interwar constitutional liberal republics is significant, is that you see where the choke points are, where the nodes of resistance are. And if you want to stop this, that doesn't mean podcast harder. That doesn't mean go on social media, like really, really enforce the shit out of your version of leftism on Blue Sky, right? Like, it means start working with people you normally wouldn't touch. Maybe try to learn a few things about lowering the visibility of some of your speech. Maybe in as far as it's possible, try to get on worse lists rather than higher ones. Be careful when you're traveling. One thing that for instance, internationally, people who are traveling into the US have started sharing advice on what to do and what not to do, so you don't end up like poor Fabian Schmidt, who I did nothing wrong, no gang tattoos, white guy from Germany, right? Absolutely legal green card holder. But number one, don't fly into Logan. Logan is apparently notorious for grilling people, especially student visa holders, and for arbitrary detention, arbitrary investigation. Be careful about what you have on your phone when you enter the United States. That's becoming a thing, especially if you're coming in on a visa or a student visa or a scholar visa. Any category of travel which will get you flagged is one which means that you're fair game for having a look-see into your social media, right? Have you ever said anything nice about Palestine, right? Like that means you're a pro-Palestinian activist if they feel like it, right? And that is grounds for revoking your visa.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of first thing you said is that, sure, they haven't won until you've crushed resistance, but I mean, like, this is where the historical point about fascism stops feeling pedantic to me, right? That because if some cadre of street fighting brown shirts has just taken state power, then they have, right, like essentially, like, crush resistance. I mean, all that's left is mop up, unless you're in a position maybe to do the Spain thing and like actually actually start a civil war, right? Like that like otherwise like it's all over. It's all over, until there's been some sort of, armed revolution or liberation, by a foreign army. Or, you know, maybe if you're very lucky, you know, the regime just sort of, you know, collapses of its own weight, internally, like after, but like not because of uncrushed public dissent, right? And I think that if that is really the situation, you know, that's how you should proceed. But since I don't work from the assumption that like it is a thing that's going to try to happen, that, you know, Hassan Piker is going to be sent to CCOT. I don't, you know, I mean, look, is it? I don't have the slightest pretense to, you know, to knowing what the outer limit of how bad it could be, like whether we might actually get to a point where things like that are on the table. It could, right? But I don't think, you know, but I don't just like start from the kind of confidence that you're projecting that is what's going to happen. That's what
let me
attempt to happen if like nothing intervenes in time to stop it, right? I think that's what you expressed earlier. Right? That they have like, I don't start from your level of confidence about that. And so I think I think under these circumstances, I worry that like this sort of effect, I mean, you know, take you know, me and Jason out of it, as much as it hurts me to say it, we probably actually both could be assassinated, and, you know, the political situation in the U.S. would be largely unaffected. You know, one way or the other by that, but like in general, right? You know, that the sort of I worry that telling people to be more quiet, you know, about you know, dissenting political opinions in this sort of situation might have the opposite effect to, you know, to what we would ultimately hope for, right? You know, because it is a very fluid situation, and you know, and I really don't think that these people have decisively won yet.
I mean, do you think, though, that a lot of people don't assume that anything bad can happen to them? I think that's, for me personally, that's my big issue with a lot of people in our world, is that, you know, when things happen that are going to happen, like if you're really serious about challenging power, you have to leave the house knowing that that's a reality of what you decided to do, right? When you go into a foreign country to go, you know, I'm going to go to Palestine to do some journalism work, you might get fucked with.
Sure.
By Israel, and it might not be cute. It might not be enough for you to record. They might take your phone. You might get.
I mean, Rachel Corrie is an American who during the early Bush years, right, was murdered by the Israeli military in exactly those sorts of circumstances. I mean, that definitely.
I definitely don't think people really know what it is to push back against power, and I think that's why, for me, I'm not going to lie and say it's not jarring to see these things.
Sure.
It's been 20 years since 9/11, right? It's been 20 years since that level of repression, which was kind of aimed at a certain group of people, right?
Yeah. Although
and we didn't have this online media sphere the way we have it now.
Yeah, that's definitely a difference. I mean, I would point out that it's like the, you know, like I think that the percentage of, you know, the percentage of people locked up in Guantanamo Bay, for example, or even swept up and sort of detained and, you know, God knows where, you know, in the initial post 9/11 roundups, who were actually members of Al Qaeda, might actually be lower than the percentage of MS-13 members. Look, targeted right now.
Look, they're targeting a Venezuelan gang that's extremely small, and a smaller Latin gang from a small Latin country.
Yeah, which, you know, I think Al Qaeda at its height was smaller than either one of those.
But still, you know what Al Qaeda? You know what they were able to pull off that those people weren't? Blowing up a building. Those people probably haven't blown up a car. I think we have to put this in the context of what happened in the country, regardless of who you think did what. That doesn't matter. We're talking about people that at most shoot each other, break into cars, and sell bathtub meth.
Yeah,
We're
and
not even
R.
talking
Brown.
about. What'd you say?
And R. Brown,
And
right? The whole in the case of the Nepali Bhutanese, right? They weren't even Latin American. There's no allegation of any kind of gang affiliation or gang activity. And here's the thing, right? For me, all of this strongly suggests that people have quotas, right? The whole we got the wrong guy. Oh, forget it. We need it's a warm body. Take him anyway. That attitude is the attitude of people, bureaucrats, of low-level functionaries who have got like a certain target to hit. And once that has been internalized as the way that they operate, right? We need at least 200 criminal aliens deported. That was the way that the Gulag operated. That's the way that totalitarianism fills concentration camps. It doesn't, at that point, you're just looking for anybody that fits the profile well enough. And part of that profile is going to be what you say about Palestine. And this is bad. This is very serious. And I know that's that we all agree on that. And I think that it's a great deal matters about the next election cycle, and not just in terms of who wins, who doesn't win, but whether or not the institutions that are supposed to supervise and manage the system hold, right? I think that one form of participation that could make a meaningful difference is being one of the volunteering to be one of the election count workers that supervise and manage the process, because if it's not you, it might be somebody that's deliberately tapped from the MAGA side. And similarly, it matters a great deal who the people are who are selecting and vetting and organizing and managing the election workers. And the United States has the advantage of also being a federation, right? The states have their own governments, most of which are not Trump run or Trump affiliated. That it matters a great deal that who's in charge of those, because that's another area where there is some institutional ability to resist and to survive, right? Like a lot depends on what happens in 2006 with the midterm elections. A lot more depends on what happens in 2008. And what worries me, why I see the potential for even greater escalation, is that just as the last presidential election became an issue of existential survival for Trump personally, right? He had been shot at more than once. He risked prison time with all the convictions that are hanging over his head. He had many, many enemies with scores to settle that were just waiting for him to be vulnerable. Now that situation for him, and also for Elon Musk, the world's richest man, and a giant circle of billionaires, functionaries, political operatives around them. If Trump is out of power and it goes to one of his enemies, if it goes to a Democratic rival, there's no guarantee this time that it'll be an Obama type, well, we tortured some folks, but look to the future type situation. just like Trump is settling scores will be settled against him by those who manage to make it if there is another turn in power. I don't know if he can afford that, right? A Democratic administration that starts looking at all of this very, very seriously may decide to send Kash Patel to prison, may decide that Tulsi Gabbard is a foreign agent, may, the folks being tortured may no longer be those that get wrapped up. ICE sweeps. And therefore, you can't lose that election, right? Like if you do, like you don't want to be in a Gaddafi situation. You don't want to be in a Saddam situation where you've lost power, but all the people you've harmed are still surrounding you. Therefore, what steps do you take to ensure that doesn't happen? Well, if you've already gone this far, why should anything be off the table?
Ben?
I mean, again, I showed up here to say my 2 cents, hit Kuba with my chair and scamper off into the night, but
It's turned into a full-on match.
I really, so we do want to cut this off at some point, but it's like, look, what you're raising is one possible scenario, which my God, if there's anything that I've known for years, I could count on Kuba for in this life, it's to come up with to come up with a possible way that things could get much worse, right? I mean, this is this is like really part of the man's core skill set, and he doesn't disappoint in this case, right? And the thing about that is that sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes it does, right? I mean, that this is
My track record's been pretty good.
Well, I mean, I do remember, when we were talking about the election and like what you thought was going to happen in the election with the scenario there, right? That basically that it was going to be, basically that there was going to be this like total breakdown of order, during the vote counting and all of that, right? Like none of that happened, but the thing. So it's like, again, sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes it does happen. You could be right? Like I don't want to, I don't want to get sort of, sucked into the dynamics of the conversation to the point where I'm like saying something I don't believe, which would be that there's, that there isn't a chance that, actually, ironically, also in a different way, part of Danny Bessner's core skill set. They have there's a personality overlap there. But anyway, I think that, I don't want to say something I don't believe, which is that you couldn't be right, because I actually do think you could be right, right? Like it is possible that is how it shakes out, right? That that there is that they end up in one way or another stealing the next election, and there's like a much harder lurch towards authoritarianism. Again, I think we've already gone, quite far. And you're sort of very right that we hit some really scary landmarks with George W. Bush, and then like Obama made some of them worse, and he backed off from other ones. It's in a lot of ways that just set the baseline from which the continued degeneration happened, and now we're degenerating much faster. So it's like, did the stolen election, lurch towards much more open authoritarianism thing happen? It could, right? I don't know that it will, but it could. Again, I think that I'm actually, and it's kind of like, it's also very funny. I saw, wanted to call out Carl Shepard in the chat, right? It's like, oh, everybody here is saying that like Daniel has any kind of point, right? Is just doing knee-jerk anti-Dem stuff. It's like, I told people in swing states to vote for Democrats. I did that in both of the last 2 elections. I voted for Joe Biden in Michigan in 2020, right? Like, in fact, my favorite kind of leftist disagrees with me about both and says Trump is literally a fascist, but also you shouldn't vote for Democrat. I really don't understand that one. But I think again, I think that this is possible, but I do think that the reason that the historical differences seem non-trivial to me, right? Like that this doesn't just seem like sort of nitpicking. Like I actually think there could be like a political cash value to the distinction, right? Is that we're not there yet in a way that we would be there if you know, I mean, if we had something like, you know, the brown shirts, the black shirts, whatever that were you know, that like had just, you know, had just merged with state power. That like I think we'd be there, right? I mean, I think that this would be like, no, definitely, right? The things that you should do are either leave or go underground if you can't, you know, convince like a few tens of millions of your fellow Americans to start a civil war with you, right? Whereas, you know, I think you're right when you say, right, a lot depends on what happens with the midterms, et cetera, right? Like that they have because it's a different historical situation, right? Because there isn't that kind of like classical fascist street fighting movement that it's like, look, you can either resist with violent force, or you can go underground, or you can leave, right? And you know, and like not for nothing, by the way, I would just point out that it's like on the standpoint epistemology stuff from earlier, right? Like I'm not, you know, totally without family lore. I'd point out here that, you know, my ancestors didn't exactly come over on the Mayflower, right? That's there are you know, some of them were, you know, fleeing from Cossacks and whatnot, right? You know, in the part of the world that produces Cubas. But yeah, I think that because we're not in that situation, I do think that, you know, I mean, in a perverse way, I mean, I'm going to agree with somebody who is on the opposite side of the question for me, right? Timothy Snyder, who it's like one of the first things he says in his fascism book is don't do anticipatory obedience, right? And you know, I think that it's you know, I think that this is a time to be sort of very loud and not, you know, and not give people the impression that that you know the Trumpists have won, because I think that kind of thing could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So but I also feel like I also feel like I'm repeating myself, and I know that if I talk to Kuba for another half hour, he's gonna convince me to pack my bags, and
I mean,
you know,
if you don't already have a bug out bag, I don't know if you haven't been paying attention.
well, fair enough.
Yeah, Ben's not me. I keep all that stuff handy. Ben Burgess, I'll see you tomorrow evening in San Francisco, and I look forward to it. It should be a good time. Have a very good, safe drive. Cuba. Who would have thought that this show that I'm doing early in the morning for no good reason would be the most watched thing we've ever done live?
I wish I could take the credit for it.
You could take
but
the
Danny opened hard, and I think it may have been the first time that you had like the debate format, you know, nerd on nerd violence.
Yeah. We usually don't, you know. I don't want to have a fucking nerd off on air. It's never fun for me, and the people that get bricked up watching that kind of shit are people I don't want to be around. If you get bricked up watching a nerd fight,
yeah, it wouldn't lead to the kind of charming chat community that we have.
No, and we do have a very charming community. This is the first live thing that you haven't been around for, so you get to meet these people as well. So when you meet them in real life, it's even fucking cooler, I think.
Yeah, I hope I can make it to New York. If that's happening, I would be willing to like I've got a plan, right? Travel with a burner phone. You probably cross overland, right? Like drive a rental car in from Toronto or Windsor.
Totally not going to recognize you. Like, who the fuck? It's me. It's me. Shut up. Walk around the corner. Shut up.
Grow a mustache.
Yeah. Be cool. Shut the fuck up. You know what? I'm not going to lie. I was going to Ben's place. He had a birthday party get together in Los Angeles on Saturday. And he goes, to make sure you don't get stuck in border traffic, I will host the show for you. I think he said that on our group chat. And I said, are you serious? He goes, yes. And I was like, okay. Pascal happened to call me. Pascal goes, oh man, have you read this Dark Enlightenment thing, man? It's kind of crazy. I was like, oh, Ben debated that guy, that Curtis Yarvin guy. And Pascal goes, word? Oh, let's get Ben to talk about it. I was like, well, check it. Ben's going to host a show Saturday. You want to talk about it? Oh, hell yeah. So Pascal's all fired up. I get to sleep in on a Saturday, which is a rare occurrence for me. And sleeping in is like sleeping till 7. And so I met up with some friends, had a birria, fucking drove across the border. So I thought it took 5 hours and 51 minutes, Cuba, to go 0.7 of a mile.
That's I mean, those are Eastern Bloc in the 80s numbers.
I have no idea why. I was terrified. I was like, dude, are they gonna fuck with me? Are they gonna fuck with, like, I don't know why. I got it, because people have been telling me some weird shit about crossing lately. Everybody's been telling me. The people I had breakfast with, the wife crosses daily. She goes, it's been weird. They were asking me for this documentation and and so I'm like, oh fuck. The guy takes my passport. He looks at it. I'm like, and he doesn't even ask me where I'm going. Have fun wherever you go. I was like, oh fuck. I got across. I told Ben, I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it. It's another 4 hours to LA. And because where I live is so cool. And I want you, last time you were here, you didn't get to experience the fun because you were working the entire time. But I was pissed off. So I said, Ben, I can't make it. He goes, dude, I'm not going to stay up that late anyway. So just turn around. So I crossed the border. You can't get a fillet of fish here in Mexico because, the big fish cartel won't let McDonald's sell fish. I got a fillet of fish and I drove right back across. No wait, coming back in, and found the coolest alley punk ska show I've ever seen. These kids were throwing this fucking show in an alley, Cuba, in downtown TJ. They had a skate ramp, like a little very primitive half pipe situation that every time a kid rode on it, I braced myself.
Please tell me you radicalized them.
By radicalizing them, making sure they were okay. You guys Todo bien? Okay. But no, it was awesome. And I was sad I didn't get to go to Ben's birthday get together because it was at a bowling alley and I love bowling. But nothing beats just kind of walking down the street and finding an alley punk ska skate show going on. Never gonna see that in the States. So that's what this is the kind of stuff that you miss out on when you come here and you're inundated with all of your government toppling work.
Next time I'll try to make it a real vacation.
It was just so sad. I was looking at pictures of that day or those days you were here, and I was like, oh man, he's missing out on all the fun. So now I know where more crazy fun is that you would actually appreciate.
Yeah, got to plan a return trip, especially since there's not going to be NAFTA anymore, but like the Canada-Mexico part is going strong.
Yeah, you can just come in. They'll high five you. They'll be like, comrade.
He's
Oh,
one
man,
of the good ones.
Yeah, make sure you have nothing but Canada shit on. Just go to
Like a special lane just for Canadians.
There's a bunch of Russians here too. Why is that? Same reason?
Yeah, they're avoiding the war.
That's what someone said. They're older. Some of them are older. They're even setting up shop at the there's a big flea market here in Rosarito on Mondays. And there's some Russian ladies selling Russian pastries and stuff.
I mean, if they could also be waiting for the signal from Trump, right? Like,
what signal is that? Like their sleeper cells?
Well, no, it's more like he signs the deal with Putin. Sanctions are over, you know, and it's приятно познакомиться. Get in here. Let's do some business.
I have met people that got stuck. I met a couple people, Ukrainians, that got stuck during when the war jumped off. They were here for, I think they were in Mexico City, and then they couldn't get through. But yeah, if you guys want to have a lot of fun, you got to come down. It was super random. I've walked by that alley a gajillion times, but on 2 occasions I've seen massive punk and metal shows, and it's always really fucking cool. And I know Kuba would have a ball at that place. And I couldn't stay very long because then the music was loud and I'm old. I did this for too many years.
Me. And you just like couldn't bear to see all of those young people endangering their knees. On the
That was the first thing I thought.
Oh my God, your knees.
When Kuba, this kid. So when I say primitive, they like got freeway railings and they're just skating on anything, right? And they've got them pretty high on this fence, probably 10 feet. So one kid gets above the railing and everybody goes, oh, and he comes back down and falls right on his back. And I just like, oh my God. Because like I met some people that I knew there and they're like, oh, you want to? I'm like, no, just looking at this is making my entire body hurt. There's nothing. Like, I'm glad these young people are having a ball, but there's a reason why you see everybody 40 and up staring and smiling, because we're like, we can't.
Yeah. You can't skate like the healthcare is free.
That's what they were doing. They were skating like the health. They were doing crazy mosh pits. And one chick got punched. It was an accident. She got punched in the face and she was just grinning. I was like, oh, everything about this is just making my pocket and body hurt. But it looks like so much fun. It's fun to look at and talk about your past. But to participate in, no. And what was fun about it, Kuba? You could like hang out there for a minute and then you could just keep on. My destination was not that place. My destination was to get fancy cookies.
To go with your filet of fish.
Oh, after I ate that, I was like, now I need affordable food in my new home country. So I went on a mission to this place that I want to take you in summer when you come down here. So, well, let's go. It's late where you are. We didn't hit 900. We hit 881.
Is that a record?
For anything I can remember. Yeah, for a live stream.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, chat. You're the real heroes.
You're the real chat. Shout out to chat.